What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of Pack-A-Day Live. I am your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. I am blessed to be joined by two amazing guests today. First and foremost, the one and only Lily Zhao. You can find her on Twitter or X or whatever else you want to call it, at Lily S. Zhao. Of course, you can find her as a sports anchor and reporter for Fox 6 now in Milwaukee because she abandoned us from Green Bay, which I'm still bitter about, but I will forgive her. And then we also have the one and only Jacob Morley, fresh from Kansas City, which is why, of course, one of the small reasons I wanted to have him on today. You can follow him on Twitter at Jacob Morley. He is a writer for Packer Report, draft analyst for the Kansas City and Green Bay draft guides, and of course, most importantly of all, a podcaster for the one and only Pack-A-Day podcast. Jacob, Lily, how the heck are you guys doing?
I'm doing well. It's weird that we're post-Turkey Day and heading into Christmas, and now we're talking Packers, maybe playoff contenders. It's weird, but I like being in this period, so I'm doing well. How are you guys?
I'm doing great. Jacob, how's Kansas City, my man?
I mean, I don't know if everyone knows this, but I'm a middle school teacher in Kansas City as well. So talking to the 13-year-olds about the upcoming Packers versus Chiefs game, not a lot of nuance in those conversations. A lot of, hey, we're going to kill you type things going on. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, with life, and just kind of hoping the Packers can make this a game and God willing can pull it out, because that Monday morning for me, the drive-in will be pretty sweet.
I feel like you've got a little bit of house money where it's like, if the Chiefs win, all right, they were expected to win anyway. Like, no big deal, no harm, no foul. But man, if the Packers win, you've got some serious ammunition.
Yeah, and I will be honest though, I am the type of person, I just won't say anything, because that's bliss. Like, I just don't want to talk about it. Like, I'll talk about it with you guys. We'll tweet about it. We'll go on, the podcast circuit, all that stuff. But when it comes to like face-to-face interactions with other fans, like sometimes, and you guys probably know this too, you start talking to someone and either one, they're way too into it and you're like, okay. And then, or they're very casual about it. And oh, Patrick Mahomes is going to whoop Aaron Rodgers' butt this Sunday. It's like, oh, okay. Okay. You haven't watched it in a while, huh? So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
It's going to be amazing. Lily, I want to kind of start with what you mentioned at the onset. 2 weeks ago, Green Bay sitting at 3-5. They are set to go against Justin Herbert and the Chargers, who now even look worse than they did at the time, but still Justin Herbert and the Chargers. You've then got the Lions on a short week in Detroit, who, crushed Green Bay in week 4, and then Kansas City and Mahomes the week after that. And it's like, you're staring at 3-8 right in the face, with your only win since week 3 being against the Rams with Brett Rippon as quarterback. And like, this was all set to potentially spiral in a not so great way. And following the Kansas City game, if it goes that way, we're probably talking about, all right, all that's left for the remainder of this season is, can you get a look at some of the young guys and see what maybe they can do, still get an evaluation on Jordan Love in some capacity. But instead, they win both of those games. And now not only are maybe we can get frisky in the playoff. Like, they are legitimately in the playoff conversation.
It's crazy. Yeah, you mentioned it. I think I tweeted this out or X'd it out or whatever you want to call it. When they had, at the beginning of that stretch before they played the Chargers, and theoretically they could have been 3-9, after this Sunday. That could have happened. But instead, they came out and beat the Chargers, which I didn't expect, because at the end of the day, it's a Chargers team that can put up lots of points, and the Packers defense played well and offense as well. And then they go on a short week to Detroit, and I thought, okay, they win against LA. It's going to be tough against Detroit. We saw what they did to them at Lambeau Field. It's going to be really difficult at Ford Field. And they came out, and I remember just thinking, like, am I in the twilight zone in the first quarter? I'm like, is this Packers football right now in 2023? Like, we're getting back-to-back scoring drives. We're getting fumbles and fumble recoveries, and the Packers are in control over the Lions, who were 8-2 at that point. It's been phenomenal what this team has done the last month. And although the first part of that month, there were losses, I think there were still monumental strides made on the offense and Jordan Love that eventually got us to this point where they've won back-to-back games, and they've shown enough improvement that we can talk about that playoff conversation, because they've gotten so much better, and they weren't going to just lay down and say, we're okay being 3-9 and talking about next year in draft picks. We want to go out and compete, and that's exactly what these guys did. So my foot was in my mouth a month ago because I was not a believer. Now I am.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I can't remember if I was talking to Paul Brettel yesterday, if it was the members only Q&A chat. I do too many of these to like kind of keep track of everything. But one of the things I mentioned is that like what you kind of want from a young team is to kind of gain all these different experiences. And obviously if they could make their way to the playoffs, that would be another phenomenal experience. Win, lose, whatever happens, just getting there would be an awesome experience. But in week 2, to come out and have a really a win that you had in your fingertips and to lose it and have it just collapse away from you. That's a great learning experience for a young team. It's not fun in the moment at all. It sucks, but it's a great learning experience. And then to follow it up the next week and do the exact opposite. I have no right to really win that game against the Saints going into the fourth quarter and yet find a way to win and have that awesome comeback in the fourth quarter. That's an awesome experience. To go through and lose some games consecutively, some of which you were pretty much expected to win or be more competitive in, and they all go against you and they just kind of have that losing streak and face adversity. That's a great learning experience for a young team if you can bounce back from it. And guess what? They bounce back from it. And to have those moments where you face a Justin Herbert Chargers team, and you know what? They try to give Green Bay the game a little bit at times, but a lot of young teams don't take that gift. Green Bay did. They took it, they won the game, and they found a way to come out with a victory. And then to go in Detroit short week and to learn from the week 4 experience where they got their teeth punched in against the Lions at home, and to give it back to the Lions in, short week in Detroit on Thanksgiving. Like, so many amazing learning experiences for this young team. I think there's so many positives to take away from that. Jacob, what have you kind of been seeing from this young and fun Packers team over the past month?
I mean, I think you guys nailed it, right? I mean, this team they're young, obviously. Like, we know that youngest team since I think Dare had like that early in the season, like youngest team since the 0-16 Browns. And I think when we all saw that, it was kind of a little bit of a perspective shift. Like, oh, like it's tough to win in this league with young players like this. And going into that first game with Detroit, I mean, they got manhandled, and there's no sugar coating that. It was very much a game where it seemed like the Lions were lining up saying, hey, we're running a gap power. Go ahead and stop it. And they, boom, 9 yards, 12 yards. Hey, Rasul Douglas, we know you're going to jump this. Boom, touchdown, or whatever that was, Tom on Ross St. Brown. And so like that kind of stuff is, even with the young team, it's kind of, it's not as demoralizing because like they are still young. They are still learning how to play in this league, but that's all fine and dandy if they don't learn how to play in this league. Right. And I think with the Detroit game, you saw a young team that is now saying, hey, we are the Green Bay Packers. We are a historic franchise in this league, and we are not just going to get dog walked again by this team. Like, that was the biggest thing for me. And we even talked about it on the Pack a Day podcast before going into that game. Like, what do you got? This is a, hey, Matt LaFleur, sometimes your teams get called soft. And we're kind of at the point now where it's like, are they? And they come out in this game versus a team that pummeled them. And they show up in the biggest of ways, the most unsoft of ways, and gave it right back. I mean, that game was such a flip the script game from the first one versus Detroit, where I think they really took it personally. And they came out in that game and they showed the Detroit Lions, like, hey, you're the Lions, we're the Packers. This isn't supposed to be this way. This is how it's supposed to be. And this is how it's been for 50 years. And guess what? We're going to try to get back to that. Now, I still love Dan Campbell. And I tweeted this like, man, I love Dan Campbell, but I want to make fun of him this week. Because, I mean, Matt LaFleur absolutely dribbled his head on the turf that game. I mean, that was, you want to talk about signature wins for Matt LaFleur, that's up there with any of them. Because, like Lily was talking about a month ago, it wasn't just the young guys. It wasn't just Jordan Love. It wasn't all of that. It was also questioning, is Matt LaFleur the right guy for this job? Not because I don't think he's a good coach. I think Matt LaFleur is a phenomenal coach, but Matt LaFleur, the teacher, like, what do we have as a teacher? And can he be someone that can take this young crop of players and turn them into NFL players? And I think the last 4 weeks, starting really with that, obviously the Rams game, the Steelers game was kind of we'll take something from that. It wasn't a total loss. And then the Chargers game, you really start to see this team grow. And then Detroit, you see the growth even more. And now you have the reigning world champion Kansas City Chiefs coming to Lambeau Field. I mean, you can't you can't write it any better than that, especially with the fact that, hey, guess what? This was Jordan Love's first game as a starter, was against this team, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was. And now here we are again, and he has this opportunity to make a huge statement. But it's not, and I urge people, it's not just Love, right? It is this young team. It's all of their opportunities to make a statement on this huge stage on Sunday Night Football. Everybody watching, Patrick Mahomes on the other sideline, the best player on the planet. Like, can you go toe-to-toe with him? I mean, that's the question we're looking to be answered. Win, lose, or draw. If Love goes out there and looks like he belongs with the best player on the planet, like, that's really exciting. And so that's kind of, in a long form, that's where I'm at, Andy.
I love it. I love it. And I totally agree with you. I think it's going to be so fun. And like I said earlier with you, I feel like not only is this maybe a little bit of a house money game for you, but it's kind of a house money game for Green Bay too. Not a lot of expectations, but all of a sudden didn't have a lot of expectations against the Lions either. And look what they did. And I'm really, really looking forward to this one and just seeing how Green Bay can compete with this Kansas City team. For obviously those of you in chat, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Vex, thanks so much for the super chat. And I'll get to your Q&A question before we end today. But Vex asks, which NFC playoff team do the Packers match up best with? I'll answer this one quickly and then I'll see if you guys have any thoughts on it as well. My first thing is, I don't really care. The biggest thing is, like, if you get there, everything's just icing on the cake at that point. Like, whatever they do, to me, is just like, you got to the playoffs in your first year with Jordan Love as your starting quarterback. That's not like, I think everyone was like waiting for Green Bay to like, all right, Rodgers is gone. And now like they're never going to get to the playoffs, and like, good luck, Green Bay. And to get to the playoffs in their first year with that would be incredible. So everything would be icing after that. Unfortunately, if you're the 7th seed, you're basically just going to get either the Eagles or the 49ers. And that's going to be an extremely tough matchup no matter what. However, if you can work your way up to the 6th seed somehow, and again, we are a far way away from getting to this point, but if we do get there, the Lions could very easily be that number 3 seed, and you could go back to Detroit and play the Lions in Detroit. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take that one. If Green Bay gets the opportunity to get in the playoffs and can get that 7 or 6 seed, I'll go Lions 3rd seed. But Lily, what are you thinking?
I'm going to say best case scenario, they have to, I think, get up to the 6th seed. And when you look at the teams ahead of them, the Vikings, the Seahawks, it's doable. It is doable. Yep. So if they can get into that 6th seed, I think it's going to be a much better matchup for them if it's still Detroit. I think if they get in as the 7, it might be a one and done situation, because I just don't think that they match up well with the Eagles or the Niners at this point. Maybe my mind will change in a month or so when, they've got a couple more wins under their belts. But I think right now, if they are the 7th seed, it's going to be really tough for them. But if they can, let me put it this way. The Kansas City game is going to be tough, but the last 5 games in my mind are winnable. If they can win those, barring whatever happens with Minnesota and with Seattle, and they get the 6th seed, I think that wild card game or whatnot for them will be very manageable for this Packers team. And if they get into that level and they play well, they've already exceeded my expectations for the season. But like Andy mentioned, if they can just get in the playoffs in the first place, that'll be one incredible feat this year. With Jordan Love, first year as a starting quarterback, young team. If they get in, that's check number 1. If they play well in a playoff game, that's check number 2. And I think regardless of whoever they do face, I'll be happy that they actually got there. But I will say at this point, Detroit, best matchup. Niners, Eagles, tough.
Not so much. Jacob, feel any different?
I don't feel any different about the matchups, but I'll riff off of what Andy said right away with just, hey, how sweet would it be to make the playoffs? And to double down on that, how sweet would it be to make the playoffs and finally beat the 49ers with a first-year starter, with, I think Krista said, 25 rookies, like the children in Green Bay going to San Francisco and doing what, Aaron Rodgers really couldn't ever do. I mean, that is a story that Hollywood dreams of, right? And so like that's my pipe dream, right? That would be so much fun to be able to go to San Francisco and knock them off with this team that was dead in the water a month ago.
You beat me to it, and that's why I'm smiling so much. Is like I've literally gone on to say in very similar fashion of like, it would be so, I don't know, ironic's not the right word, but like
apropos.
Yeah, apropos.
Yes.
If San Francisco is this team that Green Bay could never get past and just had so many issues with for so many years, and then you go and you sort of rebuild this team, or whatever R word we want to call, kind of rejuvenate or whatever. And you go with the super young team, and that's the team that goes into San Francisco and somehow finds a win. It would just be the craziest thing ever. But like you said, that's what Hollywood stories are made of, Jacob. So I'm all in, but so Lily's hoping for the 6th seed. Jacob's hoping for a 49ers beatdown in San Francisco. I'm just still like, man, if they even get there, like it would just be so incredible. And I think that I know like we get on this, like, again, this high wave of like, oh my goodness, Chargers win, Lions win. And you immediately look at, all right, Giants is a win, Panthers is a win, like Buccaneers can be a win, Vikings can be a win, Bears can be a win. I guarantee you, like, this is still a young team. Like winning 4 out of 5 games for this team, I don't care who they're playing against, is still going to be a tough ask no matter what. And it'll just be interesting to see how they kind of handle it. Now, if they beat the Chiefs, then all right, we'll talk about it in a little bit different way. But I'm just going to be interested to see how the rest of the season plays out. Lily, question directly for you from IoT. What is your favorite sports team to cover, and why is it the Green Bay Packers?
Great question. I will answer it as it is asked. It is the Green Bay Packers. I will just say because I've been just covering the team the longest. Just coming into Green Bay, of course, it's Packer mania, and you kind of start out that way. And I kind of got my first reps in the NFL covering business, I should say, on the news side of things, covering the Packers. And when I first started out way up in the UP, went down for a training camp game and was really overwhelmed by everything and wasn't sure how the process went and what a locker room was like. And then, a couple of years later, I'm in Green Bay covering them full time. So, that kind of just brings out the nostalgia for me per se, and just kind of getting to cover these guys on a regular basis, 24/7, traveling and covering those games has been so fun when I was in Green Bay and hosting shows. So just getting to know Andy and Jacob and these guys who cover, the team regularly on that side of things, and then getting to know players. That's why it's fun. And listen, I love the NFL. Football is my favorite sport, if you were to ask. So it just makes it that much sweeter. And the fact that it is the Packers, right? They have such history. And, we had such good quarterback play for a long time. So, we were never talking about let's cover a losing season. It was never the expectation. So long story short, that's why it's fun, and it's a fun organization.
First of all, I love how you're like incrementally making your way south, like UP to Green Bay.
Yeah, just go down Onion.
Like,
yep.
Little by little. I am curious because obviously I don't live in Milwaukee, have never lived in Milwaukee, but like how you're in a city with the Bucks and the Brewers and a lot of sports, obviously, Badgers, you've got, in Madison close by. And then of course the Packers are always king in Wisconsin. But when you do have two, sports teams directly in Milwaukee like that, like, does the coverage still lean Packers overall in a Packers centric state, or does it even out a little bit more the further you go south with Bucks and Brewers?
That's a great question. I will say, despite us being in Milwaukee with the Bucks and Brewers and Marquette and everything, Packers still is number one. It is still number one. It is still kind of, I shouldn't say the priority, but it is still the thing that makes the most money. It's Packers football, and that's the way it's going to be in Wisconsin. So the Bucks, I know hopefully they're going to make a run this year and be on that level, but it's Packers all the way, which is fun to say, even though I'm like 2 hours south now of you guys.
Not a bad market to be covering sports in right now with the Packers. Obviously Marquette's playing amazing, top 3 team.
3.
Yeah, in the nation right now. And then the Milwaukee Bucks too, with Dame in town. That's not a bad place to be covering sports. All right. So yes, Jonathan says, Zhao you doing and Pack-A-Day worlds are colliding. So yes, obviously if you have not followed Lily and Zhao you doing on the Locked On Packers podcast, they do amazing work as well. And you can find Lily, I think, what is it, weekly with Peter?
Weekly with Peter, yeah.
Yeah, every single week. So definitely check that out as well. One of the things, and obviously Peter's been on Pack-A-Day, I've been on Locked On. One of the things both Peter and I always say is that there is an insatiable thirst for Packers content, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, they're locked on. So, and it's like, it's all cool. And exactly. There's oxygen for everyone in the Packers sphere. That is for sure. David says this is a true test for this team. I think Detroit was a true test for this team. They passed that test, and now they get even maybe a bigger test against KC this week, which I think is going to be so much fun. And Vex finally says, needs more beer if Darnell Savage is starting, maybe absinthe or moonshine. So I don't remember the game. All right. So let me spin off of Vex's comment here. I want to ask you, and Jacob, I'll start with you. You've got 4 safeties that have started for Green Bay this year. You've got Rudy Ford, Darnell Savage, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Jonathan Owens. They've all started. They've all had varying levels of success, some ups, some downs. Assuming all 4 are healthy, what do you think the Packers would do? And B, more importantly, what would Jacob Morley do?
It really seems like the Packers love Darnell, and I hope they're right. I mean, as far as just talent goes, I mean, he was a first-round draft pick for a reason. He's oozing with talent. We haven't seen it materialize completely ever. There was a stretch, I think, like his second year, like the back 8 of his second year, it was like, oh boy, like they got one.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of hasn't been there, injuries, whatever. I don't know. But I think the Packers would go with Rudy and Darnell. And Rudy's been as solid as they come. Like, I think Rudy has completely given himself every reason to be the 2024 one of the starters, one of their preferred starters. He's played good football. And that's what I think the Packers will do. And I'm pretty positive it is what they'll do. What I would do is I would start Rudy, and I really like Anthony Johnson Jr. If you followed my draft coverage, he's a guy I thought was going to go much higher than he did. Really like his game. It seems like every week he's on the field, he's making a play. He's good at dislodging the ball out of receivers' hands. He's done it twice, 2 times in 3 games. We don't see that from safeties in Green Bay that often. But the biggest thing with him, and what always just flew off the page when you watched his Iowa State film, is him literally flying off the page on the film. I mean, he's the type of safety that, I mean, he brings a dimension of range that I think some of these other guys don't have. And I mean, you'll see someone, crossing route in the middle of the field, 36 flying onto the screen and cutting a guy down for a gain of 8. And it might have been a gain of 20 if he doesn't do that. Right. So, like, I love that aspect of his game, but he also misses some tackles. Right. So you look at that as well. I think he was credited with 4 missed tackles in their last game. So that's something he needs to clean up, and he's a young player. So I'm literally making the case for every single guy, but it's kind of is the case. Like, they haven't really dropped off that much with any of those 4 guys back there. So it really just kind of depends on what do the Packers want to do. And I think I already answered that, but we'll see. And what I would love to see them do, guys, is I would absolutely love to see them go back to Darnell Savage's Maryland days and just let him play in the slot. I don't know if he can. I'd like to see it at least. I'd like to see it for an extended period of time at the NFL level, because I love Keyshawn Nixon and I love what he brings to the team. But him having a stranglehold on that slot position in the secondary has always seemed kind of weird to me. I don't know what he's really done necessarily to earn that. But that's for the Packers to find out. But, in any case, I think they got 4 guys that are capable NFL players. And with Travis Kelce coming to town this week, we're fixing to find out, right? Exactly what they're made of. So, so I think it'll be Darnell and Rudy.
Yeah, I'm with you, Lily. I want to get your take on it as well, but I'm in the exact same boat. I think they will go Darnell and Rudy. I would go Rudy and Anthony Johnson Jr., mostly because Anthony Johnson Jr. and Zane Anderson are the only safeties under contract next year. Like, Anthony Johnson Jr. might have to be your starter by default next year, and just kind of getting him that additional playing time. And I think he has the highest upside of the 4. We saw that the floor is not bad in any way, shape, or form. So that's kind of where I would lean. I also do think that with Rudy and Darnell potentially starting at safety, I do think when they get into their dime personnel, it would not shock me if Anthony Johnson Jr. was the choice in their dime packages, just to get some playing time, to get on the field in some obvious passing downs. They only play like 4 or 5, maybe 6 snaps a dime usually per game. Now, maybe that goes up a little bit against Patrick Mahomes, who knows? But if they do go dime, I could see Anthony Johnson Jr. maybe having a role there, either with maybe Darnell Savage in the slot with, Nixon on the other side potentially, and then Johnson at safety, or maybe even Johnson used in that role. Obviously has some experience at corner from his days in college as well. But Lily, thoughts on safety?
I'm going to say same as you guys. I do think that because of where Darnell was drafted and the veteran presence that he has in that room, and the fact that I thought before he got injured, I thought he was playing a lot better than he had in the past. Like, he was tackling hard. He was flying everywhere on the field. And I think every time that we would hear in the press box, it was, hey, Darnell was in on that tackle. So it was unfortunate that he went down, but I think because he has that veteran presence, he's been there before. And like Jacob mentioned, the Packers do love him. I do think that they're going to go Rudy and Darnell, but that doesn't mean to say Anthony isn't going to be right there challenging one of those spots. And I think for him, because of the contract stuff, I think it's one of those guys they have to be wary, because he's coming for a starting job, in my opinion, in the next couple of years. I think this kid has a very bright future. He seems very smart, and like you guys mentioned, if you put him on the right position on the field, I think he delivers. So I think for now it would be Rudy and Darnell, and then Anthony is right there with them. And I think this safety class honestly has been a big surprise in my opinion, because I think coming into the year there was a lot of talk about what's the safety room going to look like. You know, you lose Adrian Amos, and you're like, can these guys left on the field in that room hold their own in the secondary? I think they have. I think they've played very well. So I would go Rudy, Darnell, and then Anthony's kind of maybe 1.2.
I'm with you, and I'm really glad you said that as well, because going into the season, I thought not only was safety going to be the worst position group on Green Bay's team, I thought it had the potential to be one of the worst position groups in all of football, to be honest. And it has not been the case. They've been all very solid. Nobody's been spectacular. You get a couple plays here. There, obviously, Jonathan Owens' big touchdown last week off the fumble recovery was huge, but for the most part, hasn't been anything sexy or spectacular, but just some real solid play from all four guys. And that's like going into the season, that's all I could have asked for. I think the other thing that Green Bay deserves credit for too is like, and kind of in a very similar vein, I think Green Bay's still searching for some really high-end talent on this team to kind of raise their bar moving forward. But man, do they know how to fill out a roster that can go out and compete every Sunday at just about every single position. And again, it's not always perfect, but you very rarely are with a guy on the field that just is like, all right, this guy's a complete, you can't win with that type of player. Like they've had to go with Isaiah McDuffie. That's a, what, 7th round pick? Was it 6th, 7th round pick? Somewhere day 3 that they've had to roll with that inside linebacker. Safeties that have been just journeyman guys and 7th round picks at safety. Corey Ballantyne was a practice squad guy at corner. Carrington Valentine was a 7th round pick this season. And it just doesn't matter where they roll out guys from. Like they're finding ways to compete week in and week out. And I think the front office deserves a lot of credit for that, and the coaching staff. Jacob, were you going to say something on that?
No, I just saw the next question. It's a really good question. I really think it's
all right. Is it Preston's question?
Yeah.
All right, Preston. I didn't even read it yet, so I'm going in blind.
Ooh.
But Preston, thanks so much for the super chat. Sir Goat Andy, if the Packers were to, for whatever reason, both fire Goody and offer you GM, would you take it aside from the obvious cash grab? That's a literal dream job, Preston. That will 0.0% ever chance of happening, of course. But yeah, I would take. As blasphemous as this may sound, if the Bears want to call, if the Vikings want to call, if anyone wants to call and offer me the general manager job in the NFL, I'm sorry. I am absolutely taking that job. So they don't even have to pay me, by the way, Preston. I can keep doing Pack a Day on the side, which would be great. You get a GM's perspective. So I'll keep doing this and be GM
for the Bears, recording a Packers podcast. Oh my goodness, what a treat that would be.
Worlds are colliding. Be amazing.
Good question. That's a good question.
All right. So Ski asked this earlier. This is an interesting one. So curious about when you hear the front office and coaches talk glowingly of a player who you've been down on, how does that affect your tape watching going forward? I'll start really quick, and then I want to get both of your takes on this. First of all, it really doesn't. I have the same process for every single player, whether the coaches talk about him differently, whether the player doesn't like me, player loves me, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go about it with the same pair of eyes, no matter what, every single time. I will say, let's take Josh Myers, for example, because I think that's the obvious one here. When Steno said something about Josh Myers and was like, he's playing the best football of his career, I kind of rolled my eyes and I was like, all right, coach speak, whatever. Like, it's kind of funny, but whatever. When Goody said it then and like doubled down on it, and now you've got a coach and a GM saying he's playing the best football of his career. I will say for like the next 2 games, I did try to like just parse it even more and be like, is there anything that I am somehow missing here with Josh Myers that like the GM and the, offensive coordinator have come out and said he's playing the best football. And I still, even with that, kind of came to the same conclusion that I had previously. But I did try to view it in any way differently possible that I could, and it still just kind of came out the same. But I think a lot of the Myers stuff is probably some of like the checks at the line and the communication and the synergy with Jordan Love always necessarily going to show up on tape. But it's very important to Jordan and that offensive line. I'm sure a lot of that stuff is super important to them, that it just kind of goes unnoticed. But for me, it doesn't really change that much. Lily, what about you?
I will say, I don't know if I can answer this in its entirety, because I do feel like us here in TV, we're not really watching tape as much as you guys would for
Sure.
Pack a Day and everything else. But I will say this, though, in terms of just hearing the coaches and the GM and just who they decide to talk about. Granted, obviously, they're going to be asked about players, but I think that it says a lot when they're asked about something generic. Hey, your offensive line, right? and they decide to hone in on somebody and bring them up, then it kind of, ticks my attention of why did they bring that person up? And I remember the Josh Myers thing, and I thought the same thing. And, you kind of watch the tape back and you're like, okay, I understand. So while I can't really answer it in this entirety, I will say we do kind of pick up on the names that are brought up. The unsung heroes that we might not be talking about 24/7 that Matt LaFleur brings up in a post-game presser, or, his availability on a Wednesday. And you're like, okay, maybe that's somebody that we can watch out through the week, and then see if we can talk with them after the locker room to see if A, that they've, done what coach said that they were going to do, or B, they jumped off the page on the field for us.
Jacob, before I get to you really quick, I want to do a quick little tangent off of that, because sometimes there is like this feel of like, so you kind of have this like film watching community, and then you've got like the analytics community and like, crunching all the numbers and trying to put the story together that way. And then you have the reporters, and like they're going into the locker room and getting the quotes. And there's people that are like, I don't care about the analytics. I don't care about the tape. I want to know what's going on in the locker room, the feet on the ground. And I want to hear from the actual reporters. And then you got like kind of like a blogger community. Like you've got all these different communities, right? Like that do very different things. And sometimes I hear like, well, those guys can't do it because they're not in the building and they're not hearing things. And, or like the analytics people be like, they can't do this. And the tape people will be like, they can't do this and whatever. And like, for me, what I like to do is I like to put all of it together. I like to put the tape watching people together and the analytics people together and the coaching and the reporting and all of that together. And like just the analysts together, and be like, all right, where are their differences, right? Like, all right, so we're hearing from the feet on the ground and the reporting that like, all right, the coaches and the staff and the GMs are really high on Josh Myers. And then you look at the analytics, and the analytics say like, hey, the pass blocking is actually really good. The run blocking is really bad. And the tape people will be like, Josh Myers freaking sucks. And then the analysts are like, they need to go in a different direction. And so you have a disconnect there. And that's where then like, I really like to dig in deeper. And when the question is like, do you go into it with a different pair of eyes? In general, when I'm kind of going through and grading it each week, no. But now when I see that there's kind of like this disconnect from those different groups of people, that's when I like to be like, all right, what am I missing? How can we sort of connect all of those dots to put together a better picture of like, is there something we're missing with Josh? That's when sort of things go up for me. And that's where I like to really kind of live in that middle ground. But Morley, what were you going to say?
I mean, two quick things, I guess, because one, money talks. Like, if you think Myers is good, he's got a contract coming up. Are you going to give it to him? Like we'll find out what they really think about him when they decide to pay him or not. And two, this is a little bit off topic, with players and how you look at them. As far as offensive line play, like I like to watch the film. I do the draft stuff. I do all that stuff. I am not good at offensive line play. I'm not. I'm just not. And I usually defer to someone else because I don't always know what I'm looking at. And offensive line play is such a 5 guys together doing something that I don't know what the call was. I don't know specifically. Did Josh Myers do that because Elton messed up? Did Josh Myers do this because John Runyon Jr. messed? Like, I don't know. So, and that's what most people, and you talk to Mike every week, Andy, he probably has a similar take on this stuff, is like, if I'm not in the room, I don't exactly know. And I've heard him say that. I don't exactly know, but this is what I think. And so I usually I like to defer to people that are smarter than me, especially on offensive line play, because if my quarterback isn't getting hit, I just assume they're doing their job.
I love that you brought that up too, because for the best of the best, for those of you who listen to QB School every week and, the Jordan Love stuff, like how many times in an episode does he say, I don't know for sure. I don't know what this was. If Aaron Rodgers, by the way, this week on McAfee, the play where we're 99.9% positive that Christian Watson ran the wrong route on the play. Even Aaron is like, I'm 95% sure that he said the number 3, which in this case was Christian Watson, but he didn't name names. But he's like, I'm 95% sure that that the number 3 was not supposed to be in that spot. He still didn't go all in and is like, yeah, that guy. There's no chance that guy's supposed to be there, because you just don't know what's happening in those rooms. Anyone that's like, I know 1,000,000% what was going on, and like you'll see it too with Kirk Benkert, and even he will say like, hey, things could have changed, and like he'll sort of preface it as well. There's certain things that we can put a very educated guess on as to what was likely going on, but there's no way to know for sure. And there always has to be that always has to be a part of the conversation, is there are things that they are coaching on, or that they may have changed in the huddle, or whatever it might be that we are just not privy to. And there's a big blind spot. and we can't know everything. So I'm always appreciative of people who bring that up as well. And well said, Jacob. All right, where do we want to go from here? And you mentioned too that offensive line is sort of your weak spot. And I think it's also wise. Like everyone has, I feel like, somewhat of a weak spot. I will be honest. Mine over the years has been off-ball linebacker. That is one where, and I've mentioned this in the past, I used to love like the Stephon Anthony player.
Did we lose Andy?
I thought it was me. We might have lost Andy.
I was like, Jacob looks like he's listening, but I can't tell.
I can't tell either. Earth to Andy. So we're getting some comments in here, but I'm sure Andy will jump back in, but I do have, so the Chiefs are upcoming, right?
Yeah, there's Andy.
There's Andy.
Hey.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that.
Do you want to? So you left off at Stephon Anthony, and I know where you're going with that. The linebacker out of Clemson, who was super athlete, everybody loved him, stunk at playing football. Yeah,
just didn't have the instincts, right? And that's something that I've learned over the years is like instincts are so huge at inside linebacker. So first of all, sorry for the internet connection, but for McDuffie, I love McDuffie's instincts. I think he's a really good fill-in linebacker. I think there's some things athletic, like you have to have both, right? I think there's some things athletically that he just can't get to and just can't do. And I think sometimes he gets eaten alive a little bit on that second level. But I really like McDuffie for what he brings to the table in the role that, what they're asking him to do as a number 2 linebacker. I think there's a difference when Quay and Campbell are in there, but I think you're pretty lucky to have a guy like that can fill in. So I know Mike really likes those instincts for McDuffie too. And I do think there's certain things that he brings to the table, but Jacob, I don't know if you have a big Isaiah McDuffie take one way or the other.
I think Isaiah McDuffie this is going to sound controversial because I like Quay Walker. I do. But Isaiah McDuffie is a shining example of why you don't really need to take a linebacker in the top 25. Like, Isaiah McDuffie's fine.
Yeah.
He's fine. You win a lot of games with Isaiah McDuffie as your inside linebacker. Is he great? Is he going to be a game breaker? No. But guess what? Fred Warner, 3rd-day draft pick, right? So, just keep taking – I consider inside linebacker similar to running back. Is it a position you don't need to have good players at? Absolutely not. You need good players at those positions. But it's one of those things like, man, let's churn and burn these guys and let's try to find one. And so that's just kind of where I'm at with that. I know that's not exactly an Isaiah McDuffie type thing, but it kind of is. And he's Isaiah. He's Isaiah McDuffie. Fine. Yeah.
All right. Before we get out of here, Lily, I want your take on Packers Chiefs going into this weekend and what you're kind of looking for.
All right. It's going to be fun. Outside of the Taylor Swift stuff.
Yes.
I was able to talk with Romeo Dobbs and I asked him kind of, what are you guys looking for in this game to come out on top? And he said, turnover differential. I mean, they got to take care of the football and the defense has to get some. I think that'll be key just to kind of slow down Mahomes and give their offense, the Packers offense, a couple more tries here at this thing. But I think it's pretty obvious though. It's the offensive line, tight ends, running backs. Those guys have to come together and protect Jordan Love, keep his jersey clean, win the turnover battle if there is one to be won, and just play clean football. I mean, it's kind of the fundamental easy answer, but when you look at how good Kansas City is and how much they blitz, how much they come after quarterbacks, and how much they will feast on opponents if they turn the ball over, that's going to be a recipe for disaster for Green Bay if all that stuff goes wrong for them. So protect Jordan, win the turnover battle, and play some clean football. And maybe they could shock Kansas City. Never say never, because I will say this, though. When Jordan Love had his first career start in KC, it was a 13-7 ball game. I mean, you never know.
Yep. I think it'll be interesting to see how, Barry goes against Mahomes again. And sometimes those things are weird where you're like, all right, Mahomes versus Barry, this is not going to go well. And all of a sudden it's like, all right, Barry figured something, who knows? But Jacob, what are your thoughts on Packers Chiefs this week?
I've got a lot of thoughts. So I tweeted out today, I'm more afraid of Spags than Mahomes in this game. And that's blasphemous to say. And I understand that. And that is not me saying I think Patrick Mahomes stinks, because he does not. He's kind of stunk this year though. He's not been the Patrick Mahomes that we have seen. And if you have not followed that team, he hasn't, he's got young receivers. He's got this and that. It's very similar to what Jordan Love started with. A lot of youth, a lot of talent. On the Green Bay side of it, it looks like that's starting to materialize. In Kansas City, it doesn't look like it really is. Rashee Rice is a really nice young player. I liked him a lot coming out of SMU. He's shown some stuff. He hasn't played a ton for them, though. Travis Kelce is the GOAT. I think Travis Kelce is the best receiving tight end we have ever seen. But he looks like he's getting older. And he's still really, really good. And don't get me wrong on that, all that stuff. But, like, I'm going to read some numbers for you guys. And this is Patrick Mahomes, mind you. So Patrick Mahomes, this is deep passing. This is passes 20-plus yards down the field. He has attempted 42, which is just for context. Completions 12, which is 19th out of 29. His percentage of passes deemed catchable. So that's a Patrick Mahomes stat. 35.7. That's 21st out of 29 eligible quarterbacks. Touchdowns, 1. Interceptions, 6. Turnover-worthy throws, 18%. That's the highest in the NFL. His NFL QB rating on passes of 20-plus yards is 35.4, which is 28th out of 29 eligible quarterbacks. The downfield passing attack has not been there for Kansas City. And guess what? That is what Joe Barry takes away. So if they want to try to force that, if they really try to want to force their hand and try to push the ball down the field, that's going to play into Green Bay's hands. Like that is a path that you could see, Mahomes is going to give you a chance to take a couple balls away. Like, can you do it? That's the other thing. Can you do it? So that's really interesting. But then you look at Steve Spagnuolo, and my buddy Craig Stout, who writes for the Kansas City Sports Network, has an article coming out tomorrow. So Steve Spagnuolo, in games with the starter being in their first 15 games as a starter in this league, he has played 13 games against guys like that. He's 12-1. And Jordan Love is one of those guys, right? His first start was there. Yeah. So looking at these stats, the most blitzed kid on this, and I say kid because they're all young starters, is Jordan Love. He blitzed him at a rate of 52.9%, which is absurd, right? Insanely. And so that storyline to me is wild, because you've got this kid that Spagnuolo has played all these young guys, and he has a script for how he wants to play these young quarterbacks, and it is make them uncomfortable. And rarely has he played 2 in their first 15 weeks as a starter. Jordan Love is in that rare company of this is the second time he's seen this defense. So what will it look like? Because Andy Reid even said today, not the same guy. Not the same guy they saw 2 years ago at Arrowhead. So what will the script be? And kind of just talking to my buddies that write for the Chiefs, their take was basically, we're going to see Spags come out, and I would guess he's going to blitz him heavy right away and see what happens. If it doesn't work, they're gonna pull it off. If it does work, it's going to be the whole game. And that's just kind of how Spags is. The other thing with that defense, they're really, really good. And I think a lot of people that haven't followed the Chiefs don't maybe understand that. You think Kansas City Chiefs, you think high-flying offense. Has not been the case this year. It has been their defense has not allowed someone to score more than 22 points all season. They've played some good offenses, the Eagles and the Dolphins included on that. So it's going to be a tall task for the Packers to put up more than 22 points in this game. Can they do it? I don't know. Like I was telling people, I could see the Packers eclipsing that 22-point mark. I could see them getting shut out. Like I really don't know what to expect from this defense, and that's why there are so many interesting storylines going into this game. The biggest for me is 100%. How is Spags what's his game plan for this Love kid? What does he think of him? Because if we come out and just see him zero blitz 52% of the time, that's going to tell you very much what he thinks of him. Like, same old Jordan, right? Same old Jordan we saw 2 years ago. So I'm really interested to see just that. Like, what is the storyline going to be post game on how the Chiefs handled him? Because And I guess the last thing I will say, if knowing what we know about Spagnuolo in Kansas City, knowing what we know about playing in Arrowhead, poor Jordan Love. That is probably the hardest place to start your first NFL game is Arrowhead, KC Mo with Spagnuolo beaming down on you with blitzes. And for the most part, 7 points isn't great, but
he got through it.
He got through it, and if Mahomes didn't go do a Mahomes thing at the end of a game, he would have had a chance to go down and win the game. And so it's fascinating to me the story within the story on this particular game, and I cannot wait to see how it unfolds.
My two takeaways from that, clearly Mahomes is due to just rip a team apart down the field. So we'll probably see that. And the Chiefs are due to give up more than like 30 points. So we'll see a shootout, clearly, is my big takeaway. I'm also interested to see how they match up Chris Jones. And I'm sure they're going to get a lot of Chris Jones on Josh Myers and John Runyon Jr. So that's going to be a big one for me to watch as well. Really quick, Vex from earlier, in-person Q&A, just meet you or for questions. It'll be a Q&A and a meet and greet. So 7 p.m. this Saturday, Badger State Brewery. Come out if you're interested, free admission, and just come and chat some Packers, and hope to see a lot of you guys there. That's going to do it for us, though. I got to get out of here. Lily, where can we find all of your amazing work, and where can we find you in Milwaukee?
Fox 6 Milwaukee. And if you listen to Peter, of course, Locked On Packers. And of course, Andy, I love all your stuff on Pack a Day. So thank you for having me on here. But Fox 6 Milwaukee, find me there.
Appreciate it. And Jacob.
Yeah, you just find me on X at Jacob Morley. I kind of just piddle around during the season on these podcasts and stuff, and that's fun. But really when I get to work is during draft season. So if you go over to PackerReport.com and check out the Packer Report draft guide, that's really where I get to shine. So appreciate you guys.
That Packer Report draft guide is a must-have for any Green Bay Packer fan. And it's a kind of the gift that keeps on giving, because even after players like sign with Green Bay down the road, you can still always look back and see what the scouting report was and how they fit with Green Bay. Just really, really awesome. So make sure to get that every year. Follow Jacob at Jacob Morley. Follow Lily at Lily S. Zhao. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. That's going to do it for us. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.